Hello.
Hello and
Oh,
welcome to not to Have I Got NDC for You. That's a thing we used to do. Welcome to Tech Bugs and Rock and Roll, episode 21. macOS Sonoma is better than Windows 95, and that's a fact.
Yes.
And we'll get onto that in a second. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing good. The new way of doing the intro, where there's kind of like just a gentle beat playing for like 2.
Yes. So Mark has been having hilarious internet today because Mark lives in a cave on the other side of the country, and is strobing in and out alarmingly.
Yes.
It's like Real Player. It's quite lovely. It's a little blast from the past. Mark is buffering right now.
I'm buffering.
That's buffering with an F, and we will not accept any other suggestions. Let's try that again. Hello, Mark. How are you?
I'm good. No, so there I was talking about the intro. And it's like a quiet sort of ticking beat, and then like a high-pitched cowbell comes in or something.
Yes.
Just before the actual theme music starts. And so last week, when I was editing the sounds for publishing as a podcast, I was trying to find that exact point by looking at sound waves. And you would think that a high-pitched cowbell would show up, but no. No, it doesn't.
Well, no, you need to look at a Fourier transform to get a high-pitched cowbell to show up, because pitch doesn't show up on the graph, but what you'd get is a frequency spike. But Fourier transforms are hard.
Yes.
And, I mean, very cool. Like the amount of stuff you can do with them is mind-meltingly amazing. But, Anyway. Yeah, so what you're saying what I should do for next week is mix a version of the intro that just has like a moment of silence before it kicks in, so that's where we can punch in with the edit.
That would be really helpful.
So I have spent a significant part. So we're going to talk about line breakers for a bit, because line breakers is a joke that got out of hand and is now, like almost everything I do, it starts out as something that seems like a bit of fun after a couple of beers, and by the time, I don't know, none of these things has ever finished, but I have all of these things in my life that start out as a couple of people having a pint and going, you know what we should do, that would be fun. Line breakers is now at the point where I have had to research the customs and sales tax laws of the United Kingdom, the European Economic Area, and specifically Norway, which is not what normal people do for fun, you know. It's I have strange hobbies. So Russ says YouTube is great for understanding fast Fourier transforms now. It is, like, visualization. I had to learn Fourier transforms in the days before we had videos. So I had a series of professors try to explain it on a chalkboard with computers that could maybe run a Fourier transform in about a minute if you were lucky. And now it's brilliant and everything's amazing. But
I just vaguely know that there was a dude called Fourier.
Yes.
He's not the pendulum dude. That was Foucault.
Hello, Jake. How you doing?
Yes. I can't see the chat either. There's no chat showing up here for me.
Mark is going to find the chat. So Fourier transform, what it basically is a way of taking literally any signal and going, this is made by mixing the right sine waves in the right proportions. Literally anything you can do. And the thing that's kind of mind-blowing, so first of all, like if you've ever looked at the old modular analog synthesizers, like the difference between like a and a wave is just about how many sine waves get added up and in what order. And if you can add enough sine waves in the right order, you can synthesize just about anything. It's how FM synthesis works. And then somebody went, well, hang on, what if we did it in 2 dimensions? Like, what if the wave wasn't just a noise? What if the wave was like patterns of light and dark across a grid? And then someone went, well, if we do that in both dimensions, then we can draw any picture using a combination of sine waves, and that's how cosine compression works. And then someone went, well, what if we do it in 2 dimensions plus time? And that's how MPEG video compression works. And the whole thing is just unbelievably clever and cool and has some incredibly gnarly mathematics. Anyway, I've been building workflows. So the problem with line breakers is I've got about 7 years worth of songs now. And the earliest songs that we play in our set are songs that I made when I didn't know how to do anything other than record the screen and whack the spacebar in PowerPoint to make things happen in time with the beat.
So like we're talking about like the video for We're Going to Build a Framework.
Yes, that's right. Literally, that was made with Camtasia and PowerPoint because I didn't know any other tools. And Jake is doing great. Jake is also watching with, I think, about 75 seconds of latency, which will make conversation very science fiction-y. So, so I've been going through, and I'm like, the problem is we keep changing configurations. You know, we have all these things now where a certain subset of musicians will have an opportunity to perform, and it'll be like, crap, well, we've never done a show with bass but no keys before, so now I need to make mixes for it. So I've been trying to come up with a workflow that will basically let me go, we changed the thing. All right, what's the minimum amount of work I can use to fix all that? So we are now using, I think, more PowerShell than any band on this planet.
See, I had an idea for all of this stuff, which was to write a Blazor server application.
Yeah.
And the server runs on your laptop.
Yeah.
And it can serve to web pages the individual stems of the track and potentially also tab for the fretboard people and sheet music for Eli because they can read sheet music because they're dreadfully clever. And then you just go start, and we don't need we can mix what's on our sort of iPads or whatever into our in-ear monitors and stuff, and have the tab, which there's one song in particular where I don't think it's possible to learn the bass line, and it's driving me insane.
Which one?
The Big Rewrite, American Pie.
Yes.
So if you look at the canonical bass line, the original bass line on the original recording, it's quite clearly a dude who's been playing bass for 30 years, just doing what sounds good.
Yep.
Because there's
it never repeats,
patterns,
does it?
No repetition, nothing, nothing. And so I either need to get in 30 years of bass playing practice in some kind of condensed time. Like if Groundhog Day could happen to me, that would be awesome. Just 30 years of Groundhog Day, and all I do is have a bass lesson over and over again with a teacher who gets progressively more impressed that I've only just picked up the bass. And then I will be able to do it justice. Or I just do what I do, where I kind of play the root and the third and the fifth and maybe the seventh if I'm feeling particularly fruity. But just looking over at Hannes's chord chart thing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, that one has very little. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's just some guy jamming along for 8 minutes, and there's no repetition, no patterns. But yeah, it's as I've said many times, bass is I'm not going to say it's the easiest instrument, but I think it's the most forgiving. I think as long as the timing is solid and you don't hit the wrong notes, nobody notices, or very few people will notice if a lot of the right notes aren't there.
Yeah.
Because they'll be like, this song doesn't sound quite like it's supposed to, but they won't be able to figure out why. It's like shaving someone's eyebrows off when they're drunk. Something's different, but they can't put their finger on it.
Yes.
So
the conclusion that I've come to after a year and a half of bass is that the learning curve for guitar is really steep, particularly the way they tend to teach it, because they teach chords first.
Yeah.
And so you've got to mangle your fingers into weird shapes, and like for bar chords you've got to be able to push down 5 strings with one finger all at the same time whilst doing interesting things with other fingers. And so it's, you know, the learning curve is almost vertical at the start. It may not go up very far, but it is steep. Bass, the learning curve is like flat for the first month, because there's so many bass lines, so many ones that you know, and you're kind of like, oh, I wonder if I could play that. But and then you start getting into jazz and improvising bass lines. I mean,
there are
slap and all that stuff.
There are some recognizable songs. So Dreams by Fleetwood Mac. I reckon that you could take any human being who is big and like has long enough arms to hold a bass guitar, and you could teach them that song, and they would be able to play it within 10 minutes.
That was one of the ones. You remember the first Guitarioke I came to?
Yeah.
And I'd learned like 3 songs. But you kept pulling me up on stage to do other ones that were really easy. I'd been playing for like 3 weeks. Yeah. And I think there was Get Lucky by Daft Punk and Pharrell Williams. And Dreams was the other one.
Because it's this dum
as long as you basically have a sense of rhythm, then you're fine.
Yeah.
But yes, it's...
Anyway, okay, so I'll make a version of the intro with a gap in it so you can do the edit, because I'm becoming...
Yes.
It's kind of funny how what I'm really appreciating right now is how your first year or 2 of doing something, you're probably not going to be very good at it. And, structuring video projects and structuring music projects, I came up with a song that was good enough that I could put it out there and stick it on YouTube and stuff. But going back 7 years later and being like, I did not know anything about maintenance, and I didn't understand anything about, what is real. Why am I going to be coming back to this in 5 years' time? What is the requirement is going to change? Yeah. And the one thing that I've given up on is I used to make them all in 1280 instead of 1920, so they were only 720 pixel high def.
Right.
They're staying in 720. I'm not going through and recreating all the animation. The new ones are high def, but
yeah.
Anyway, so the title of today's episode. So what we do every week, we have this little Trello backlog of things we think are interesting to chat about. And then the day before, we'll grab one and sort of throw that on StreamYard as the title of the video. And I was looking through them, and macOS Sonoma is better than Windows 95. Mark, tell us about how you got ratioed on Twitter.
The thing is, I actually didn't get ratioed. So I got 793 replies, but I did get more likes and reposts than that. And so, I got a lot of likes.
I must have read my numbers wrong. I was looking at that this morning. And
certainly, the last time I checked.
So what did you do to upset the Twitter people?
Well,
tell us the story.
There was a tweet from Gergely Odos.
Mm-hmm.
Saying Mac developers have been patiently waiting when Apple will finally ship either a touchscreen MacBook or allow the macOS to run on iPads. Apple has not done it, but Microsoft has. And the replies to this from Mac users were just almost united in saying macOS is just better than Windows. And so I kind of went, I'm going to tweet, and I'm going to call them Mac Lifers because it sounds a bit rude, but actually it's just a reference to the Line Breakers song, insisting, and I'd love to see their working. What exactly makes macOS better? Because I find it clunky and awkward. And I got so many replies, and I can boil them down into a few simple groups. There's the people who will hate Windows for whatever the current hating Windows reason is, which at the moment is it shows you ads, which I'm not noticing really. I use Windows 11 on my laptop, and I'm not really... Yeah. There's like Candy Crush is pre-installed, but you can just uninstall it. And then there's it's a Unix people, and you're kind of like, yeah, okay, fine, but WSL2 is actually really good. And then, there's the people who have not used Windows since 95 or 98 or possibly XP, and are still comparing macOS Sonoma, the latest and greatest macOS release, to how they remember Windows the last time they used it.
Yes.
And I think far more of those than any other.
Yeah. And that kind of, it's a perennial difficulty with the state of the sort of tech industry, I think, that at some point you've got to pick a lane. At some point you need to be like, I actually have work to do. I am going to take the set of tools that I feel most comfortable using right now, and I am going to use that to do the job I have to do. And once you do that, the Stockholm Syndrome starts to set in a little bit. Yeah. And it is, most of us don't have the luxury of saying, you know what, I'm not going to accomplish anything for the next month. I'm going to spend the new month flailing around an unfamiliar operating system like a newborn who doesn't know how to walk and trying to figure out how to make it all work. Yes. And, you know, I have got to a point, I was forced to do that. Because I went to work for a company whose entire code base had never been run on Windows by anybody ever, because it was all Ruby and Rails and PHP and all just kind of weird Dockery things. Yeah. And I was using a Mac. Actually, I had Windows on a Mac, and I just repaved it. I put macOS on it. And, you know, I'm now at the point where, you know, Mac and Windows, they both work. They are different, and they have a lot of relatively trivial differences that will bother you every day until you get used to it. Like, where do you have to click to drag a window? And, yes, you know, like on Windows, you can have a window that goes across two screens. macOS, no, not a thing. No. And, you know, neither of those is the right answer, because there are arguments for and against both of them. But at some point in the development of that platform, the engineers went, no, we are going to do it this way, because, you know, tech is about having to make decisions about how things are going to work. Now, weirdly, the thing, I'm almost at the point now where it doesn't matter if on a Mac or a PC. 99% of what I do is either on the web, or it's Visual Studio code, or it's PowerShell, or it's Markdown files, or it's Adobe or Microsoft. Yeah. Visio doesn't run on Mac, and I like Visio. Visual Studio doesn't run on Mac, and more to the point, until very recently, nCrunch didn't run on anything except Visual Studio. So that kept me on Windows, and Logic Pro is streets ahead of anything I've ever touched on Windows for audio. But then you get the really weird things. Like, if you... This is how much time I have spent jumping between the two. If you create 3 shapes on a slide in PowerPoint, and then you group them, and then you animate the group, on the Mac, all 3 shapes will animate simultaneously. On Windows, they'll animate one after the other.
Right. It's the little things, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the little things.
And that's the little thing. Yeah.
We were going to do my new thing that I thought of, our regular feature.
Mark thought of a thing. Shall I play the intro music for the thing?
Play the intro music for the thing.
Here we go. Let's get kicked off YouTube. Okay, how do you tell StreamYard I'd like to start it from the beginning?
I don't know.
We just wait. Now we'll play it again.
So, yes, welcome to a regular feature, if we do it again. We'll see. This is called The Good, The Bad, and The Bugly. And we have to choose one thing each in each of those categories, something that was good this week, something that was bad this week, and something that was bugly. Because that's
all right. Well, I can tell you what I found this week that was good is Obsidian. Obsidian.md.
Yes.
Which I discovered is the top-level domain for Moldova, in case anybody's wondering. I live and breathe Markdown files. I spend a huge amount of time writing things. I use Markdown for almost all my web stuff until it really needs to do anything clever. And I also use Markdown to write all my talks and blog posts and articles and notes and all kinds of things. And so this actually covers the good and the bad, because the bad is that I rage quit Evernote because their marketing pissed me off so much. And that was, they put up this little thing saying, you can upgrade to professional for only 48 pence a week. Which, one, I hate it when they do that, because it's not 40. I don't pay for it weekly. I pay for it annually. Like, don't tell me a weekly price. Tell me how much it's going to cost when I renew. Yes. But 2, I could not. Every time I logged into their website, this banner came up saying, "Do you want to upgrade?" And if I said no, it said, "You can't dismiss this offer, or you'll never see it again." Which meant I couldn't actually get into their website to see what professional did, to see whether it was worth 48p a week or something.
Yes.
And so I went on Twitter to complain about this, because I hate it when companies do that. And Sean Wildermuth said, "Have you seen Obsidian?" And I clicked it, and I have never fallen in love with a piece of software so quickly. It's a Markdown editor on steroids, that syncs to the cloud and has native device support and basically does everything that I ever used Evernote for, except it does it with markdown files on your file system instead of proprietary format in the cloud. So you can stick it in Dropbox or turn it into a website or whatever you like. It's got a mobile app that just works. It's got dark mode. Its icon is purple. I like purple things. And I spent like half an hour just getting it set up and then went and cancelled my Evernote subscription because it was so good.
Yes.
And yeah,
I have to say, I feel kind of bad.
Yeah.
You know that thing where you've got something and it's really awesome.
Yeah.
And you would tell your friend about it, but you assume that he would already know because he already knows about that sort of thing.
You've been using Obsidian for the last 8 years?
2 years. And yeah, I just have I have my Obsidian Vault, which is in Dropbox.
Yeah.
And Obsidian doesn't charge me anything for being connected to Dropbox, but it is actually connected to the Dropbox API. And yeah, everything is just sat in there. Every time I start a new job, I create a new vault in Obsidian. And yeah, the ability to link from one document to another, or from one sort of note to another note, is
so
just
this I have not
amazing.
discovered yet, because when I opened it up I was like, this does everything I want. Also there's this thing over here called a graph view, and I don't know what that is, so I'm going to close it and get on with my life. What is it? What is the graph view?
I don't use the graph view.
Oh.
It sort of shows you all your things in like a mind map format, I believe. I'm perfectly happy with just having a list of words down the left-hand side, which are different notes, and then and the search is amazing because it will just find things in your vault really quickly. And the linking is literally just in Markdown, putting in square brackets and the name of the thing you want to link to, and potentially the hash, whatever that bit, the anchor reference. But yeah, no, it's really, really good, and it's really, really free, and I hope they make money from their cloud offering.
Well, I'm already paying for Cloud Sync because well, one of the sort of killer use cases for me is I want to be able to write. I have a Bluetooth keyboard for my phone that fits in my pocket, and when I'm on an aeroplane or a train or just kind of, I will prop my phone up somewhere, get the keyboard out, and I will write stuff. And I often don't have internet when I do that. And I don't want to worry about the fact I don't have internet. I just want to write stuff. And then later, when you get off the plane and you take your phone off airplane mode, it's like, oh yeah, I'll just put all these in the cloud for you now, shall I? And I don't even want it to tell me that's happening. I just want that to happen by magic. And so I slung them the $4 a month for the sync and worked out that's still half the price I was paying for Evernote. And Evernote is just one of those companies that they started out really good. When I first started using them 10 years ago, maybe, it was just text files that sync across all your devices, and they, and I don't want to single them out because I see a lot of companies doing the same thing. The number has to go up. They have to keep doing something. The idea that a team of maybe 20 engineers are like, you know what? The 5,000 people in the world who like our product are all paying annually for it. That's fine. Let's just keep updating it. But they can't. They got to go. So they got to be like, oh, we'll add collaboration. We got to add single sign-on. We got to add this. We got to add that. We got to. And now there's the AI editing assistant. And to me, it is offensive that somebody would take a tool that I use to construct my own thoughts and put a button in it saying, do you want a machine to do this for you? You know, and maybe I'm old and maybe I'm out of touch, but no, just, that's not what I use these tools for.
You know what I miss? Do you remember that Lotus organizer way back in the days of Lotus software? Lotus did, this was when software was skeuomorphic, when they made things to look like the things that they were replacing. And Lotus made an organizer that looked like a Filofax.
Yeah.
And so it had a calendar bit in it, and you clicked the calendar tab and it opened the calendar and you could put things in there. And it had a contact section and a journal section and a notes section. But you could drag a little sort of link icon from anything to any other thing. And you could drag it onto the middle of the Filofax where the rings were, and it would just sit there, and then you could go to another section, then you could drag it onto something else, and it was inspired. That's the thing, is being able to link pieces of information together. That's what the internet is for.
I'd like to do an experiment with all the folks who are watching live on YouTube. What I'm going to do, folks, in a moment, I am going to count down from 3. I'm going to count 3, 2, 1, 0. And when I get to 0, I'd just like all of you to post in the comments, just post the word hello and press enter, because I want to see what the distribution curve of latency for folks watching the live stream is. I want to see what's the earliest hello we get and what's the slowest one. So you already hands on keyboards. Everybody get ready. 3, 2, 1, go. And now we're just going to continue with the podcast, but every time somebody pops up in the chat, we'll say who it was, so you know how far behind real time you are out there right now.
There we go.
Jake, okay, so Stephen, Origami Marie, Bogdan, 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go.
Yeah.
So that was there's Russ. Hello, Russ.
We're not going to carry on with the podcast. We're just going to sit there at the tank. There's
Alan. Hey, Alan.
There is quite a distribution here, isn't there?
I know. Well, it's. I don't know how much of it is just latency in the infrastructure, and how much is people kind of not watching in real time because they missed the start, so they just rewind and they're kind of watching it on catch up. So it's kind of live, but not really. It's like when they have 5 seconds of delay. Niall says, "Will it work via Twitter?" Hello, Niall. Yes, it will.
Apparently, it will.
Apparently, it will.
So yes. Back to our regular feature. The Bugly, because you did your good and your bad. So your good is Obsidian, your bad is Evernote Marketing and the Bugly.
Yes. So it's not really a bug, but it's a frustration. So one of my side projects at the moment is a project I am calling Benedict, until I have a better name for it, which is short for Benevolent Dictation, which is a teleprompter you control with your voice. So you paste your script into it, and then as you talk, it just keeps up with where you are and scrolls the script, and it doesn't matter if you deviate a little bit. And that's actually... I was talking about it last week. I had this bug where you could get to like 58 minutes of a 1 hour thing and then it would hang because I'd had an infinite loop in there. And it's voice controlled. So I can say Benedict bigger and it'll increase the font, and I can say Benedict flip and it'll flip it upside down so it's the right way round in the teleprompter mirror. And I wanted to build Benedict full screen, and you can't. And there is a JavaScript full screen method, but it has to be initiated by a user gesture, and browsers do not consider voice control to be a gesture. And so you have to press a key or click something. It has to be a keyboard or a mouse event, which I was like, no, that's... And, instantly I'm like, well, it's accessibility, even though that's not remotely the reason why I'm personally vested in this. But... and that was like that sort of it was that frustration of all the things I need here, they just don't work together because they don't, and they're not connected, and they won't be connected because evil people will use them to do evil things.
Is that something you can fix by triggering a JavaScript event? Or
no. So the whole thing is designed so that
browser plugin to do something.
I mean, you'd need one. There's probably a way of bypassing it. The best idea that I've had so far, and the fact that this is a terrible idea will give you some indication of where the level's at, is to build an auto hotkey plugin that watches that browser window, and if the words Benedict full screen appear in it, it sends a keyboard stroke into the browser's input buffer, so it thinks you've pressed a key, which AutoHotkey can do, because AutoHotkey is amazing, and there is nothing it cannot automate. But, yeah. So what's your good, your bad, and your bugly?
So my good this week is they've just rolled out a new thing on docs.microsoft.com.
Yeah.
And the doc pages for .NET classes and methods now have a link to the source code.
Oh, that's quite cool.
That is really cool, because a lot of the time the documentation doesn't give you all the information that you need. You're kind of going, oh, I'm getting a null reference exception, and this doesn't even say it could throw a null reference exception, so why is that happening? And you can dive down into the source code and go, that's why. And yeah, so that's my good. And my bad would be using certificates for authentication, like client certificates, mutual TLS or whatever they call it.
The thing that the internet was going to do so that you could install it in your browser and not have to sign in everywhere with usernames and passwords, but somehow we decided that actually passwords was fine.
And this is the thing, passwords are fine. If you enforce sensible password security, and these days password checkers automatically check against rainbow tables to make sure you're not using something that's been cracked a million times before. But no, certain things within the pan-European energy exchange industry are still using APIs which are actually RabbitMQ, or certainly AMQP, and they use mutual TLS. And the problem with this is that you're working on writing a client for this thing, and you say, can I have the certificate for the test server? And they send it to you, and it expired in July last year. But because it lasted for 3 years before that, there's no kind of regular process to get a new certificate. There's no automated thing. It's just you email your person at Deutsche Börse and they will send you a certificate back if and when they remember. And so, yes, just OAuth or OIDC or API, something, I don't know. So that's the bad. And then the bugly relates back to my macOS versus Windows thread, because quite a few people on the macOS side saying, oh, I bought a Mac in 2013 and I haven't had a blue screen of death for 11 years. And you're just kind of like, well, yeah, because that's not what Mac does. It does something else when it reaches that state. Normally, it just hangs with a permanently spinning beach ball and no responsive windows or menu bar, and the only thing you can do is turn it off. Because Mac, it's ashamed. Windows is proud. When Windows goes spectacularly wrong,
today is a good day to die.
And I couldn't remember the last time. Actually, I'm pretty sure I do remember the last time I had a blue screen of death was when my previous desktop PC started dying, and it was just shorting out or whatever it was doing, and I would get about one a week, and then I got a new PC, and I haven't had one since. And I said, I haven't had a blue screen of death in years. And literally the next day, I press F5 in JetBrains Rider to debug some code, and blue screen gone. And it's just it's like you mention wardrobes and then Facebook starts advertising them to you, except far more sinister.
Do think we've got to a point now when, I managed to crash Windows hard maybe once a month. And my main workstation has got 4 cameras and 7 screens and so much USB hardware hooked up to it that it's a wonder it boots at all, let alone actually works quite well. And, it for a long while, if Windows blue screens on something like a laptop, I'm like, there's a fault with the memory. And probably 50% of the time, you then run memtest86, and it's like, yep. And you're like, all right, well, I'm glad we cleared that one up quickly. Because bad RAM is so weird. Because it'll be fine for weeks, and then it'll be like, no, that doesn't work. Not a thing.
And so, I don't know how yours is set up, but I've got 4 sticks in this one, and they are 2 pairs, so they're not matched properly. They're 2 pairs, and so but so far it's been stable, but maybe this is the start of the end.
Switch it out. Now, one thing that I'm going to say on the subject of macOS versus Windows versus Linux, something that macOS has never, ever, ever failed to do, something macOS gets right every single time, and every other operating system I've ever tried screws it up maybe 10%, is turning the damn laptop off when you close the lid.
Yes.
Because the number of times that I have been working on my framework or on a Dell or a Sony or with Windows running on Mac hardware, and you're at the airport, they call you gate, so you shut the lid, put it in your bag, and then like 20 minutes later you're like, I've got very hot luggage. And you're like, oh, look at that. All that battery power I was hoping to use on the flight is currently going to make my laptop as toasty as possible.
Yes.
And Every RAM has a faulty sector by default, says Jake. So yeah, the one of the remarkable things about modern semiconductor manufacturing is there's a thing called yield. And yield is basically, how much... when they make like a 2 gig RAM chip, it's actually got 2.2 gigs of storage on it. And then at quality control, they just tell it which bits not to use because they failed the quality control. And there are, when they manufacture, the flat screen LCD crystals, there's a certain number that are like, oh, well, if this has got more than 5 dead pixels, then it's this quality, and if it's not, it's that quality, or cut it in half and use the other. It's remarkable how much, and for a long, I don't know if this is still the case, but for a long time, all of the different clock speeds of Intel CPUs, they came off the same production line, same factory, then they would QA them. And the ones that passed all the QA would be the 3.6 gigahertz chips, and the ones that crashed a little bit would be the 3.2 gigahertz chips, and the ones that crashed a lot would be the 2.8 gigahertz chips. Exactly the same process, which is why, overclocking would often work, is you could get a level of performance because it's the same silicon, it's the same hardware, it's just, when they ran a burn-in test on it, some of them fell over quicker. So
and this is why Intel sell chips all the way from the Core i9 14 or whatever it is, all the way down to the little Pentiums and Atoms and things. Is because they're selling the same basic chips, just in different packaging because some of them don't work properly.
So what else was on our list? So I discovered a wonderful thing. The Windows 10 wallpaper, the default one with the window frame and the blue smoke and the lasers shining through it and everything.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a real photograph. It's not computer generated. Somebody did that with smoke and lasers in a photography studio. And that is just
marvelous.
It reminded me, I've always something I think we have lost as a society is practical effects in photography and all kinds of things. If you ever want to go down a real interesting rabbit hole, look at how they do studio photography for food, because it's just full of... They don't use real cream, they use shaving foam, because shaving foam holds its shape under studio lights. So if you ever see like a photograph of a slice of cherry pie with a dollop of cream on the top, it's not cream, shaving foam. And there's all this.
It's not syrup; it's Castrol GTX.
Yep.
On your
they
pancakes.
pour maple syrup over a stack of pancakes. That's going to be engine oil because it looks good on the video.
Yes, it looks more like maple syrup than maple syrup.
And one of the things I remember when Star Wars: The Force Awakens came out, and some of the cast did a chat show appearance or a Comic-Con appearance, and BB-8 came out with them because BB-8 is real. BB-8 really is an actual robot that will run around and follow, and obviously it's remote controlled; it's not autonomous. And I used to be massively into
They actually have an autonomous BB-8 at the Galaxy's Edge attraction in Disney World now. It just moves around and it's doing its own thing, and it will sort of stop when it comes up to a person and whistle at them and ask them to get out of the way. It's amazing. It's just brilliant. I'm pretty sure it's autonomous. It's obviously, possibly there is somebody with a radio controller somewhere, but I'm pretty sure it's autonomous, and it is the coolest thing. Because that was the big difference, though, with the new, with the sequel trilogy, is they actually built stuff. They built big sets and they acted on them. Whereas the whole of the prequel trilogy, it was just nothing but green and blue screen. And so, which makes it very, very difficult for the actors. Because they don't know where they're supposed to be, and they're relying on George Lucas explaining it to them.
For random reasons, I watched The Phantom Menace the other week, and I had sort of blanked out how awful it is, how just every performance in it is
insipid.
The bizarre thing going back to it, Jake Lloyd as Anakin Skywalker is actually pretty good, because he's believable as this really smart, enthusiastic 9-year-old kid who's building his own robot. And the others are just like, like one of your internal organs is desperately trying to get up and throttle your brain before it can say this word of dialogue. Jake says, did we see the pink flower on Apple Watches? I did not. But they recorded several hours for the natural flower to blossom. So they time-lapsed an actual flower opening. That's fantastic.
I noticed when I switched, I've got a Mac Mini on my KVM now for doing the music recording stuff, and I noticed when I switch over to it that the lock screen sort of image, it's like from a helicopter of the veldt in Africa or something, and it's moving. It is, you're sort of ever so slowly flying into it, and I just wonder how long you could leave that for, that it would carry on looping.
So I have noticed that there is the particular piece of landscape that my lock screen helicopter is flying over. There is a building on it which has a little like aerial on its roof that looks exactly like you've smashed your screen. And every time it gets to that bit, I look around, I'm like, did I like... Because I have quite a small office in my house, and I'm frequently moving around it with guitars on and things. And I've already, in 5 years, I've gone through 2 liquid crystal display screens because of just bashing into them with the end of a bass guitar or something, which is not ideal. And then it's it's just the wallpaper. It's just a little slidey thing. Mark has gone very, very still. I have no idea if we still have Mark, but while we're waiting to see if Mark comes back, he is coming back.
I've got a red light flashing on my Deco route.
Oh, yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you about a story that cropped up in Wired magazine this week about a Bitcoin wallet from 2013 that someone forgot the password for. They generated a secure password for their Bitcoin wallet, then they put the password in a BitLocker something. It got lost. They lost the keys to the thing with the password in it. And there was, $3 million worth of Bitcoin in this vault or something. And they reached out to some security researchers and said, "Do you think you can get this back?" And they went, "No, don't be daft." And then they went, "No, come on, it's $3 million. Do you think we can do it?" And they revealed that they had used a thing called RoboForm to generate the password. Prior to 2015, welcome back, you're here.
Hello.
So prior to 2015, RoboForm had a security vulnerability in that it used the system clock as the random number seed. And so what they did is they found a 10-year-old version of it. They reverse engineered it. And that meant that they could, basically, if they could narrow it down to which day the password had been generated on, they could generate every password that RoboForm would have generated on that day and use them to brute force it.
Wow.
They got it down to about a 6-week window. And then, looked at some other passwords from the same period that the same person had generated and said, well, okay, you weren't generating punctuation, you were just doing letters and numbers and alphanumerics. And then they did it, and they used that. They restricted the scope, and they just generated all the passwords, and they found it. And that's, thanks to you talk about these vulnerabilities in random number generators and those kinds of things. Often they turn out to be the weak spot in any security system. Is genuine randomness is really, really hard.
It is. And this is why there's actually a part of the little billions of transistors on modern CPUs and SoCs is actually just an entropy generator, where it's like quantum madness is happening here. And we can't possibly tell you whether it's a 1 or a 0 that's going to come out next. Nobody could do it. And if you rewound time and did it again, it would be different because chaos theory. And so when you use the cryptographic random number generator in .NET or whatever the equivalent is on your platform, it's talking directly to a part of the CPU that has been engineered to be pure chaos on the inside. Whereas when you use random.shared or create a new random with a number, it's just repeatedly applying an algorithm to it, like Mandelbrot set, to generate the next number, which sometimes is really useful. Sometimes Minesweeper had a thing where you could go, oh, I did that one in 11 seconds, and somebody else would go, oh, give me the number. and you could just give them like a 6-digit number or whatever it was, and then that would make their game the same. And it's basically just a random
free
number
cell
generator.
on old versions of Windows.
Yes, that too.
Had a certain, like, every unique shuffle had a number. So if you couldn't, and they were all solvable. So it wasn't like Patience where you win or you lose. Free Cell was, I think it was Free Cell, was like every one of these games is solvable.
We've tested them all.
Yeah, and so you will keep going back to game number 417
until you get it.
Yes.
So so yes, random. There was one more thing about the macOS thing. The other thing that was coming up was people complaining about a feature that Windows 11 doesn't actually have yet, but a lot of people seem to be quite concerned about it, which is this Copilot recall thing that's part of the new Copilot plus PC, whatever it is, that's going on in Windows 11 24H2. And people are sort of summarizing it as, I don't want Windows taking a screenshot every second so that it can remember everything that I do. And I think you could probably caveat that with, while I have an incognito browser tab open. What are you doing on your... Oh, that.
You're buying presents. You're shopping for presents. That's what incognito mode is for.
Yes, and I think that it shows people trust Apple in a way that they don't trust Microsoft. And I think to a certain extent that is earned. Apple have, over the last 15 years, with the rise of Facebook and all these sort of spyware things and Google and everything else, Apple give you really good stuff to defend you against that. Like, you sign up for an account in something, in an app, with your Apple ID, and it gives you the option to give those people a random made-up junk email address, which it will then forward to the address that you... And there's just... And, you know, there's like VPN and IP address masking and all that sort of stuff is just built in now. And so people trust Apple to look after their data and not do bad things with it.
Yeah.
Whereas Microsoft, every time somebody goes, oh my goodness, this piece of software that Microsoft make is sending telemetry to their servers and my privacy is being invaded. And you're like, that's how they make the software better. And I'm pretty sure it's anonymized. I mean, it might not be. They might be evil. I might be just a trusting fool. But yeah. So people assume that Microsoft is going to be sending these images off to Azure data centers to classify them and everything.
Marie has just mentioned playing the Alice in Wonderland card game on the Apple II lab machines and waiting until a lab neighbor had the same hand and then following them to get a preview of the cards, which is rather nice.
That is cool, yeah.
But no, it's... You know, the big tech companies, the sort of trillion-dollar giants.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to me to think, where does their money actually come from? And, you know, Apple, I suspect a significant part of it comes from selling hardware. Because, you know, they don't really, certainly not on a scale of companies like Alphabet and Meta, they don't have a massive advertising division. Yeah, they make a lot of money out of iTunes and media and, you know, all that kind of stuff.
And they're 30% on the App Store, I think.
Yeah.
Generates a fair bit of revenue.
You know, they sell computers and they sell phones and they sell things that run on those computers and phones. And in almost every transaction, you, the end user, are actually giving Apple money directly, and they, in exchange, are giving you a product or a service. And, you know, somebody like, you know, Meta, Facebook at the other end of it, it's almost impossible to buy anything from them as a private individual because you're the product. You know, why would the product be giving them money? They're selling you. That's what they're doing. You know. I've been I've paid for Twitter. I'm a paid Twitter user now, and it doesn't have any adverts on it, which is kind of nice. And I'm very torn as to whether that's just a thing worth paying for or not. Because you know, I've often sort of evangelize it. If something's good, just, let me give you money for it and then go away. And don't worry about advertising and revenue. And subscription kind of clouds it a little bit. I miss the days when you could buy a software app and it would just work forever. Or it would work until it was out of date. But that wasn't because somebody remote kill switched it. It's because you're like, oh, well, it doesn't run on Windows 2000, which is fair enough because I bought it for MS-DOS.
Yes,
actually, that's a bad example because it probably would work on Windows 2000. And I think Microsoft are their main driver of revenue is clearly Azure, and so they're like, we want everyone running stuff in our cloud. And I've been doing some digging around this for the talk I'm doing in Oslo the week after next. And it's like, Microsoft are a private corporation with a fiscal responsibility to their shareholders. So on some level, everything they do is because their lawyers have said, yep, this will make you profit, or this, within your stated aims, because the way investment works is a company says, we do this. And then the shareholders are not allowed to turn around and go, you're not making enough money for us. You should start doing oil wells and seal culling and, but within the scope of their defined business activity, somebody's gone, you know what? Yeah, Microsoft doing open source is good for business. Microsoft doing giving away .NET for free, good for business. Microsoft VS Code, don't charge money for it. You'll get more Azure customers if you don't. Yes. But I mean, the Windows snapping your desktop thing, I used to do that. There's an app called Time Snapper, which is written by Leon Bambrick, Secret Geek on Twitter, who is a wonderfully entertaining person who's cropped up at various points throughout my career in tech. Time Snapper just ran in your system tray, and it took a screenshot every 10 seconds. And stuck them in a folder, and it was great for filling out my timesheet, because I could go and say, where was I? What was I looking at? What was the browser tabs I had open? And it would summarize all that for you. Yes. And a couple of times I actually used it to recover work when my computer crashed while I had some code open that I hadn't saved yet. And I was like, oh, hang on, I've got a time. And you could go in and, it was a screenshot, so I had to type it back in, but I didn't have to figure it out again. Yeah. So
these days you'd have been able to copy and paste.
I know. Isn't living in the future delightful and wonderful and marvelous?
So to anybody who thinks that Microsoft is going to be sending these photos of you scrolling Twitter or Instagram or whatever off to their data centers, pretty sure they're not. And the reason I'm pretty sure of that is that they've set this kind of 45 trillion operations per second limit for the NPU to be able to run this stuff. And the only reason they would need an NPU that powerful is that they're going to do everything locally. They're going to classify the images locally. They're going to index everything locally. It is going to be a local LLM that is trained on what you do over time. And, potentially, if that runs locally on your machine, that could be brilliant.
Yeah.
Where was that thing that I saw? Instead of having to kind of go through your browser history and try and remember the title of the tab that had the thing that you were reading about the Synth Audio C4 pedal, you could just go, hey, recall, where was that web page with the review of the Synth Audio C4 pedal?
Yes. No, it's... I mean, local LLMs, the whole... I have definitely... I've been trying a lot of stuff on ChatGPT in the last couple of weeks, and Copilot as well, and it is so consistently awful, the quality of the suggestions that it throws at you. I had a nice little picture I found on a webpage of some colors that I wanted to turn into a JSON array to use in Oh My Posh. And I went, I'm sure ChatGPT can do this. And it basically took this palette of pinks and greens and yellows and went blue, 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 blue. But it gave them the right names. It's just all the hex codes were blue.
Right.
And I'm like, and of course then somebody pops up on Twitter and says, oh, but you need to use this keyword and that keyword. I'm like, if I wanted to use keywords, I'd write a computer program, And I think it's not that I think it's massively overplayed its hand in terms of what it claims to be capable of. I think that is the biggest problem we have at the moment, is that, I often ask ChatGPT to write me PowerShell scripts, and what it invariably produces is something which doesn't work, but is the right shape. And then all I have to do is correct. There will be a mistake in half of the lines, but I can see what it got wrong, and I know what I need to do to fix it, which is sort of better than nothing. But
essentially, we've automated cargo culting. So, and if you don't know what cargo culting means, in the war years, when America was off all over around the world fighting various other people, they would set up bases on remote islands in the Pacific as kind of staging areas, and they would turn up with all their ships and their troops and everything, and they would build a runway and radio towers and all this sort of stuff. And the people living on this island who had no previous contact with civilization saw all this happening. And then all the time the Americans were there, aeroplanes would land and they would bring boxes and boxes of supplies and crates and things. And some of this would be given to the natives, to the indigenous people to keep them happy. And then the Americans left and the planes stopped coming and the boxes stopped coming. And the indigenous people went, well, obviously everything they were doing and waving their sort of lights in the air and so forth, these were rituals to their gods to get them to send the magical flying machines. And so they built their own versions of things. So it looked like a radio tower, it looked like a runway, it looked like the torches, and then wondered why the aeroplanes never came for them. But you can see photos of these things that they built. And that's essentially, we call it a bad thing in software development. You see something somewhere and then you don't really understand how it works, but you try and recreate it. And that's what ChatGPT, that's literally the definition of how it works. It's, what it's
cargo
supposed to
culting
look like.
Is one of those interesting things where a lot of people don't like the phrase cargo cult, because it conjures all sorts of connotations. But it is, it's a reference to a very specific observed cultural phenomenon.
Yes.
That we don't, I have often said to people, can you think of any other example, anything else to replicate that idea of, people going through the motions of a process where all they can see are the visible output. I mean, to me, Scrum is a perfect example of this, because Scrum was based on, there's a bunch of people doing software really, really well, and some analysts go and study it, and they go, what are they doing? And they observe things like, they have a little meeting every morning where they all stand up. And so clearly that's what we do. We all stand up every morning, and that's how we make good programs. They have a sprint deadline where they ship code every 2 weeks. Well, we should ship every 2 weeks. And what they don't see is you get a bunch of really clever people who are good at programming and let them talk to the customer and figure out what the problem is. And so you get, your ceremonies, and you get proxy product owners who tell you every 2 weeks what was good or bad, but actually a real customer is still 6 months away from ever touching this thing. Yeah. So no, I'm absolutely open to the 12 Angry Monkeys as a better example of following a ritual. I don't know. I do think that we probably need a better phrase for it, but I don't think we have one yet. So anyway, now I have a little thing I'm going to start the ball rolling on here, because at some point in the next 2 months, so Rockstar 2.0 is going great. And I've been on Twitch quite often in the last few weeks, doing
hours at a time.
.NET, and it's brilliant. I'm absolutely loving, building an interpreter in .NET 8 is just the most wonderful thing. And at some point, I need to get this thing for real, because I want it on Aptitude, I want it on Homebrew, I want it on Chocolatey, and I want it on the web, so that anyone can go brew, install Rockstar, and they get the Rockstar interpreter in. I have no idea how to do any of this. So I'm going to start gently, because what I thought might be fun would be to find, for each of those technologies, somebody who's done it a lot, and get them on the stream and be like, right, today we are going to put Rockstar. So as soon as I get to a point where it is sort of mature enough, that it makes sense to do this. Get someone and they'll be like, right, what do we do? How do I turn this code into Choco install Rockstar and that will just work? And what do I need to know about updating it and that kind of stuff? So if any of you folks listening are like a sort of, I mean, I'm not going to go for like an expert, but somebody who's done this with a bunch of packages and can help point me in the right direction and would be up for a couple of hours on Twitch one afternoon figuring through it. I'm going to do this after we get back from Norway, so it'll be a couple of weeks away. But so yeah, the plan is that July that will become a real thing, and then August there will be a massive party, probably more than just the one, because Rockstar 2.0 seems like a good excuse to have one.
Yay!
So yay!
So, Bourbon asked a question while we were talking about cargo culting and everything. What I always wondered is whether Scrum/Agile is actually good, and because we listen to our viewers and our listeners, I've added, is Agile actually any good, to the content shortlist for next week? And so hopefully we will actually talk about it, because I think that's a good thing to talk about.
I think what we should do, we'll take this comment from Bourbon here. Let's paste that into the ticket and talk about that next week, because we're out of time for this show.
Very good idea, yes.
But that looks like it could get some really good conversation going. Also means Bourbon has to tune in again next week, and that's how we grow the viewership.
Yes, viewer retention.
Yeah, they love that. Engagement, like and subscribe. So next week we're just doing a regular show, aren't we?
Yes.
And then the week after
that, we'll be live from NDC Oslo.
We'll be live from NDC. So I'm thinking we should probably... I was thinking the JetBrains booth on the expo floor, they might be up for...
I'm sure they'd let us do that, yeah.
Live from JetBrains with a small audience. We're not going to do it in a proper room with a big stage, because the program is full. But yeah, I'm sure that the JetBrains or the AWS folks, because we know a lot of the dev advocates who are on those
GitHub
booths.
guys, because GitHub's usually there. We'll
so
find... Whichever one is prepared to give us the most money, really.
I'll do it for stickers. I'm not nearly as mercenary as you. So
I want at least a T-shirt.
Yeah. Actually, I can't knock it. JetBrains give me unlimited access to every product they have ever made for free. Like, at this point, I can't realistically ask them for any more. No,
fair enough.
But yes, Bourbon, we will talk next week about big software and product managers and all that kind of stuff. And
yes. So there you go. That's something to look forward to. All right. That is it for this week. As always, take care of yourselves and each other. We'll be back on YouTube at 4 o'clock next week, and this should be available as a podcast from 9 o'clock on Friday, the 31st of May.
Have a good week. We'll see you folks soon.
Bye.